Was it the institution that kind of poo-pooed the idea of becoming a community college instructor and dedicating yourself to education, or was it my advisor specifically? Was that your question?
Yeah.
The answer is yes, yes, and the larger academic institution is what I would call stacked against good education. And this gets into, there are great resources on online. We could do a little search if we wanted to. This gets into the structure of higher ed funding. In the community, in California, we have 4 types of institutions, really. We have the community colleges, the state colleges, the UCs, and then private schools. The way that there's the Donahue Act of 1960, which is the law that implements what they call the California Master Plan. And the California Master Plan is the mechanism by which California puts into code the way that our higher institutions of learning are stratified. So community colleges, to become a community college professor, do you remember this conversation, Steve? Have we had this before? I know Henry probably has some memory of something.
I don't know if I remember it.
As a community college teacher, my 10-year requirements are that I do 100% teaching. So there's no requirement for research. I don't have to be publishing. When my colleagues come into my classes, all they look for is effective teaching techniques. I have some stuff to say about the hiring requirements and whether or not we do a good job training people to become effective teachers who then evaluate new teachers on that. That's a different conversation completely, but there is a very real focus on teaching in that scenario. And if I do any publications outside of that, that's nice, but it could be a detractor from my case for tenure. So if I publish like 15 papers and I'm a really shitty teacher, I probably won't get tenure there. The next step up is what they call primarily undergraduate institutions, so PUIs. That's the CSU at the California state level. PUIs grant usually bachelor's and master's degrees, and in the contract, it's usually 80-20 split. So 80% teaching, 20% research. In the Bay Area, in the greater Bay Area, because this is such a great place to work, it's more like 50-50, at least if I look at the publication record for many of the professors that Henry is currently working for with at San Jose State. Like those people publish like 2, maybe even 4 papers a year. The amount of energy, so think about how much time it takes to do one blog post. Okay, now imagine you're having to generate really technical theory that nobody's ever seen before and then publish like a 30-page blog post. That takes a lot of work. It takes and then you're going to conferences and et cetera, getting grants, which is a ton of work, right? So effectively what happens when you enter those institutions as a faculty member, you're on a probationary period. So you have to go through the tenure process, which is anywhere from 4 to 7 to 9 years, depending on circumstances, usually between 4 and 7. And during that time, you have faculty members who are tenured professors who are looking over your resume and asking themselves, does this person fit in this institution? When the research component of that application comes up, they're looking at, like, there's this classic story about, do you know this in research, professor? They'll write random people in your field. You don't even know, and they don't know you, you've never met, and they'll ask them, how is this person's research? And they'll write a letter for you, like how your research is. Like it's literally, and you don't even know who those people are. It's an anonymous letter. Like they just write people in your field who have likely read your papers. What do you think of this person's academic work? Right? And if you've produced no research, do you know what that person's gonna write back? I have no knowledge of this person whatsoever, right? And so it's kind of out of your control in the sense that you have to be like, as somebody going for that position, you have to be writing papers a lot, which means your entire economic well-being this model is based on your income from the university, but you might not have that income if you don't have that job, right? But in order to stay in that job, in order to have a secure position, you need to get the feedback from people who are reading journals that don't even know you. And so could you imagine? But what happens if you don't teach well? Like what, your students are going to complain? Okay. Like, what's the problem there, right?
Yeah.
Like so at the UCs, it's 80-20. At the UCs, the amount of research that you should be doing is 80%. The amount of teaching you should be is 20%. But effectively, in the 1960s and 70s, so the private institutions really skew this because private institutions have huge endowments because a lot of times they are funded by billionaires, basically, who like Stanford. You know why Stanford is so special? It's not because it's a special school, because they have a ton of money. I mean, literally, like, I don't know if you read that article in the San Jose Mercury a few years ago about Stanford being one of the largest landowners in the Bay Area. Like, I think it was the largest landowner in all of the Bay Area. Yeah. The amount of land that Stanford has just in itself, let alone the multi-billion-dollar endowments and the just river of venture capital and small money going through that school is stupid. So what will happen is Stanford, because it has so much money, will poach some of the best academics in the world, people who are most productive and are trendsetters. And then what they'll do is they'll guarantee those people that they don't have to teach any classes. Do you know what happens if you're a professional scholar and you have zero teaching load? Do you know what happens to the amount of research you can do on a daily basis? Yeah, if you don't have to spend any time teaching, all you have to do during the day is think, right?
Yeah.
So they'll have these really, really sweet packages for those institutions. But if you're a UC Berkeley and then Stanford is picking all the best talent and you want some of that talent, what happens? You're losing access to that, right? And so then you have like this academics arms race where UC Berkeley will be like, okay, well, not only are we going to give you zero teaching load, we're also going to give you all these other perks because we can't compete with Stanford on some of the stuff that they can do, right?
Yeah.
But the moment that UC Berkeley does that, well, guess what UCLA is thinking?
They're going to do the same thing.
Okay, and now that UCLA thinks that, guess what UC Santa Barbara and UC Davis and, I mean, UC Merced and Irvine are even, like, they're still building, right? But now you have this academic arms race where in order to get the best talent, you're basically creating structures, systemic structures that make it in the financial interest of your faculty to de-incentivize education, aka the amount of time that it takes to create really, really rich educational experiences, and center or focus on the research bent, because there's so much money involved with that. There's grant money, there's private industry, there's private industry benefits when students get out of an education and they're ready for that type of thinking, right? Because it's basically a free training mechanism.
Yeah.
Right. And so there's like this whole, what you might call pathway. And so it's actually really, really difficult to get tenure at these institutions. Like talk about, like, there are people that get tenure at the age of like 42, and that's young. Right. There are people that do it at 21, but like, it's hard. And so by the time those people get tenure, could you imagine like thinking, so now you've risen to the pinnacle of this thing, and then all of a sudden, like, a student doesn't know how to like enroll in classes. Like, are you going to spend 4 hours helping that student enroll in classes? No, it's not my fucking problem. So says the mindset, right?
Yeah.